King Paimon is the demonic antagonist who motivates all of the horrific events seen in Hereditary. But the entity's origin goes back to 1577, where he's mentioned in Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, a Latin grimoire or instructional book on summoning supernatural entities. According to that text, Paimon started as an angel, where he had a great admiration for Lucifer and became one of his followers. When Lucifer was thrown out of heaven for his arrogance, his followers, including Paimon, were banished. The most detailed information about Paimon's lore comes from the Lesser Key of Solomon, a mid-17th century spellbook on demonology. The Lesser Key of Solomon contains info on 72 demons and how to summon them for personal gain. Each demon can be classified as a duke, prince, marquise, knight, president, earl, or in this case, king. Each demon has a sigil or magic symbol that represents them, which according to the Lesser Key of Solomon are to be made out of a specific metal based on their classification. For kings, the sigil is to be made of gold. In Hereditary, the stand-in for the Lesser Key of Solomon is a book found in Ellen's possessions simply titled Invocations, and in the text we can see bits and pieces of the same information found in Lesser Key. The book actually references earlier writings from the Goetia. It's talking about Ars Goetia, one of the 5 books that make up the Lesser Key of Solomon. Diving into the quickly glossed over details of this book tells us everything we need to know about King Paimon and allows us to unlock all of the secrets of Hereditary. To learn everything about King Paimon, stick around to the end of this video. This video is sponsored by Audible. Welcome to Horror History. I always thought it would be funny if I ever hit 1 million subscribers to do a collab with a channel with 100 subscribers. Well, I did do that, and this is that video. So today I am joined by my TA, Sarah from the channel What the Horror.
Hello class, I'm Sarah and I'm so happy to be joining Professor CZ for today's horror history. I've been a big fan of CZsWorld for a couple of years now and it's been so much fun working on this project. I was blown away by Hereditary and what a well-crafted masterpiece it is, and I'm so excited to be talking about it today.
Obviously I picked a horror channel that I thought my audience would enjoy, so go ahead and subscribe to her channel. Before we continue on with Paimon's history, let's explore the details about King Paimon in these ancient texts and how they show up in Hereditary.
Paimon is most often depicted as a male with an effeminate face riding atop a dromedary. Being a male with a feminine face causes Paimon to want to correct his form by inhabiting a male host. The in-movie Invocations book adds that King Paimon has become livid and vengeful when offered a female host, which could explain some of the horror seen in Hereditary. According to Lesser Key, wherever he goes he is preceded by a host of spirits and demons in the shape of men with trumpets and well-sounding cymbals. Paimon has a great voice and roars when he arrives.
I'm not an expert on identifying musical instruments, but I believe all of these sounds are accounted for in the movie's soundtrack during the Rebirth scene. First comes the roaring Paimon vocals, then the cymbals, and finally the trumpets. Paimon knows and can teach science, art, and other secret things such as the mysteries of the earth, water, and mind.
Give us your knowledge of all secret things.
The Invocations book also makes reference to knowledge of physics and astrology, but we never see the rest of the page. Paimon can bestow upon the conjurer great gifts of wealth, dignities, and good familiars, and he can bind men to the conjurer's well. He can also provide an answer to any questions posed by the conjurer.
You could always count on her to always have the answer.
And if she ever was mistaken, well, that was your opinion, and you were wrong.
It is said, though, that if Paimon is summoned alone, then an offering or sacrifice must be made. He must be observed to the northwest, for that is where he is housed.
We have looked to the northwest and called you in.
While we only see bits and pieces of Hereditary's Invocations book, there are a few takeaways, such as the idea that when calling upon Paimon, one should and indeed must be entirely without fear, because Paimon will feed on one's fear. We kind of see this play out, because as the Graham family starts to accept the idea of something demonic in their house, the paranormal activity gets more and more pronounced. It also discusses the possibility of cementing a working relationship between Paimon and the conjurer, where Paimon can influence part of the person's life. Some examples are given: a difficult coworker,
What?
an uninterested object of affection, or an annoying habit are all problems that Paimon could theoretically help with. We don't really see any of this in Hereditary, but we do see an example of what might happen to someone that King Paimon deems to be an obstacle. While these benefits all sound great, resurrecting Paimon is no easy task, as we see from the struggle of his most loyal servant.
In 1939 or 1940, Ellen Taper Leigh was born. We don't know if she is the one who first connected the family to King Paimon or if it was one of her ancestors who simply passed the association down to her, hence the title, Hereditary. What we do know is that she eventually becomes the queen to King Paimon, which essentially seems to mean that she is the cult leader responsible for making sure he's able to find a vessel. If she wasn't born as a servant to Paimon, I would assume that she took on the role before getting married. This would give her a reason to have kids so that she could create a perfect vessel for her demonic king. This, however, would not go according to plan. She met a man named Martin Leigh, who would eventually become her husband. She most likely married and had her first kid, Charles, in the mid to late 1960s, and then had her daughter Annie in the 1970s. When Annie was a baby, her father Martin had psychotic depression and starved himself to death, or at least that became the official story. Not much else is known about this time period, so I'm going to infer a little bit. Perhaps Ellen's original plan was to use her first child as a vessel for Paimon once he got a little bit older, but once he was older, he was resistant to what she was trying to do. Instead, she decided to have a second child, who turned out to be a girl, Annie. King Paimon did not want a female vessel, so Ellen went back to trying to have Paimon possess the older sibling, but at this point, Charles was very aware of his mother's sinister plans for him. One of Ellen's hobbies was embroidery, and she created custom doormats for her kids. Annie's contains a compass with the 8 cardinal directions. The northwest is highlighted in gold, a reference to the requirement to summon King Paimon while facing northwest. Charles's mat is marked with the Paimon sigil and 4/5 of a pentagram. When Charles realized that his mother was trying to use him as a host for an evil entity, he was driven to suicide.
My older brother had schizophrenia, and when he was 16, he hanged himself in my mother's bedroom, and of course his suicide note blamed her, accusing her of putting people inside him.
After losing her son and primary target to play host to King Paimon, the relationship between Ellen and Annie was strained. Annie likely moved out as soon as she was able. Annie eventually got married to Stephen Graham.
She means Graham.
A psychiatrist, and one might assume that Annie was able to meet Stephen as a patient receiving psychiatric help on account of her tumultuous past. Annie and Stephen's first child was a boy named Peter, so Ellen tried to get close to the family again, seeing him as another potential landing spot for King Paimon. However, Annie didn't let her mother get anywhere near her or her son during this time. This led to a lot of arguing and Stephen instituting a no-contact rule which lasted until 2003 or 2004, when Annie got pregnant once again, but this time things would be different.
Halloween season is upon us once again, but decorations are not the only way to set the mood. One of the most effective ways to get in a spooky headspace is with Audible. You know that list of the best horror novels that you probably should have read by now? The Shining, Patient Zero, the Fear Street novels. With Audible, you can breeze on through them at whatever preferred reading speed you'd like. The Audible app makes it easy to listen anytime, anywhere, like while traveling to a haunted house, or while in line for said haunted house. Audible offers an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, from bestsellers and new releases to celebrity memoirs, mysteries, thrillers, motivation, wellness, business, and more. You'll discover exclusive Audible originals from top celebrities, renowned experts, and exciting new voices in audio. Members get a free title every month that you get to keep regardless of your membership status. If you happen to be an Amazon Prime member, you get a second title every month. This month, I'm continuing American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. To try out Audible Premium Plus free for 30 days, visit audible.com/CZsWorld or text CZsWorld to 500-500. You'll find that link in the description, audible.com/CZsWorld. In 2004 or 2005, Annie gave birth to a second child, who would go by Charlie, a gender-neutral name in honor of her deceased Uncle Charles. This time, Annie gave in and let her mother into the picture once again.
Which is why I gave her my daughter, who she immediately stabbed her hooks into.
There's evidence to suggest that the real Charlie was replaced by King Paimon as soon as she was born. Annie states that Charlie never cried as a baby, even during her delivery. This probably alludes to the idea that Paimon is a demon with no human emotions. Later, we see a bird crash into Charlie's classroom window. Everyone in the class jumps, except for Charlie. She doesn't even flinch. If you need further confirmation, director Ari Aster confirmed in an interview with Variety, Charlie was possessed from the moment she was born. As outlined in the demonology text throughout history, Paimon did not feel at home inside of a female body, and this may explain why she appears to have so many health issues. Her peanut allergy is the only affliction mentioned in the movie, but a lot of fans have theorized that she may have elements of Down syndrome or autism. And if that is the case, it's easy to see how a disorder could be triggered by the incongruence between Paimon and the female body he's possessing. Obviously, Paimon did not want to be in a female body in the first place, but Ellen realized she was getting older at this point and she was running out of time to try to resurrect him. So she created a plan to use Charlie as a temporary host until the cult had the opportunity to transfer the demon to her older brother, Peter. In the meantime, she gave Charlie preferential treatments, took care of her, and even kept her from her mother.
Even when you were a little baby, she wouldn't let me feed you because she needed to feed you.
Feeding Charlie may have also allowed Ellen to slip these black herbs into her meals.
He means herbs. The use of herbs in witchcraft or occult rituals are said to make a subject more receptive to communication with the other side and to ease connection with spirits and demons.
This photo was originally supposed to be part of Ellen's photo album, which Annie discovers closer to the end of the movie, but it seems that Astor moved it to the family's fridge where we see it earlier on in the film's runtime. But during the photo album scene in the script, the picture is described. Annie's mother guides a baby bottle into baby Charlie's mouth. The bottle's milk is polluted with black herbs. We would see these herbs and oils come up several times more, like for example, on the doormat she created for her kids. As you would expect, Ellen treated Charlie like a boy so as not to upset Paimon.
She wanted me to be a boy.
I find it interesting that Ellen gives Charles' doormat to Annie's family, despite it clearly saying Charles and not Charlie. Almost as if she's trying to make King Paimon feel more at home despite being in the wrong body. She also makes a doormat for her friend Joan, who is part of the cult as well. Hers is decorated with hexagrams. The hexagram is also known as the Seal of Solomon, as in Solomon the King, after whom the grimoire The Lesser Key of Solomon is named. Solomon is said to be the first man ever to use demonic spells to his own advantage. Joan's doormat also contains the black herb imagery seen on the others. Another gift Ellen gave to her daughter was this necklace of Paimon's sigil. Ellen can be seen wearing the same necklace. It's possible that this creates a spiritual connection between the two, allowing Annie to be a victim of Paimon's manipulation based on what happens next.
Annie is a sleepwalker. When the kids were young enough to share a room, she covered them and herself in flammable paint thinner in their sleep and lit a match, only waking up just in time to put it out before setting everyone ablaze. It seems that Annie is subconsciously at King Paimon's will, but her conscious mind is strong enough to resist his manipulation. Perhaps going through so much family trauma as a kid and being married to a psychiatrist as an adult made her waking mind tough and harder for the demon to penetrate. This may explain why she is vulnerable only in her dreams and prone to sleepwalking. This mental toughness seems to keep Paimon out of her head for the most part. It's implied that psychological turmoil makes it easier for him to possess a victim. Remember, it is only after breaking Peter down with tragedy after tragedy that he becomes available as a vessel. The cult's plan, broken down into the simplest terms, seemed to have 3 steps. Step 1. Break down the family's psyche using tragic events. Step 2. Convince them to open themselves up to demonic possession by performing a séance, which is secretly an ancient ritual. Step 3. Possess Peter so he can take his place in front of the congregation. The sleepwalking incident with the paint thinner is part of step 1. It planted a seed of distrust in Peter towards his mother from a young age, and he would never be fully convinced that she really was sleepwalking. This would come back as an advantage for Paimon later on.
As Ellen got older, she continued to keep her life as a cult leader secret from her family. Her photo album documents some of the strange rituals she engaged in with Paimon's cult, including one where she showered in gold coins while wearing what looks similar to a wedding dress. I would identify this as a result of the promise of riches detailed in the spellbook that teaches the summoning of King Paimon. There are also many photos of Joan, who seems to be her right-hand woman, the next highest ranking person in the cult. Ellen's continued dedication to King Paimon and the cult caused others to take notice, and they perceived her strange behaviors as mental illness.
And she didn't have an easy life. She had DID, which became extreme at the end, and dementia.
Obviously, this was just the way that Annie interpreted her mother's communications with the spirit world. Everyone in the family tree with a blood relation to Ellen is diagnosed with some kind of mental illness at one point or another. From the outside, it would appear that it runs in the family, that it's hereditary. But it seems very likely that each case was actually a reaction to demonic activity that was interpreted as mental illness. Because of the guilt she felt about their relationship, Annie took her mother in to live at the house with them near the end of her life. She stayed in an extra bedroom at the end of the hall where she carved this triangle onto the floor. It's pointed diagonally, which made me wonder if this was another sign to look to the northwest. Looking for answers online brought me to the movie's script, which does indeed specify that the triangle is pointed northwest. Triangles also seem to be an important part of the spellbinding process. When we see the ritual in progress in Joan's apartment, a photo of Peter is placed inside a triangle that has been crudely carved into the kitchen table. Long story short, Ellen had been performing demonic rituals in her room while living at the house. Annie is a professional artist who makes miniatures of many scenes from her and her family's life. As far as we know, these are all real moments that she's recreating. One miniature we only see in passing is this one, depicting Ellen standing in Stephen and Annie's doorway like a ghost in the middle of the night. Does this mean that Ellen was also a sleepwalker? Is this another trait that was passed down to Annie? Or was Ellen attempting to do something to them as they slept? Perhaps something involving dark magic. If that is the case, it would not be her first time. Ellen's photo album contains evidence that she used a family photo of Stephen, Annie, Peter, and Charlie as part of some candlelight ritual with the cult. This could explain the bizarre series of events that seems to be aimed at the Graham family shortly after Ellen's passing. Before her mortal body fails her, Ellen writes a note to her daughter which vaguely alludes to the benefits of resurrecting King Paimon, though in order to make sure that her plan goes off undisturbed, does not mention any of the specifics, like her involvement in cult activity. The card reads, "My darling, dear, beautiful Annie, forgive me for all the things I could not tell you. Please don't hate me and try not to despair your losses. You will see in the end that they were worth it. Our sacrifice will pale next to the rewards. Love, Mommy." As her health declined, she was moved to hospice before her death on April 3rd, 2018. Her funeral was held at Spring Blossom Cemetery on Saturday, April 7th. That morning, Charlie sleeps outside in the treehouse. Her father scolds her for this, saying that she'll catch pneumonia, to which she responds,
"That's okay."
It seems Paimon could be aware that he'll soon be able to ditch this vessel. Later that morning, many of the cult members showed up to mourn their queen, unbeknownst to the family, who assumed that they were Ellen's friends. During the viewing ceremony, one of the cult members smears something on Ellen's lips. In the movie, it's difficult to see exactly what she's smearing, but the script once again adds more clarification. An older woman arrives at the open casket. Her finger is dipped into a small bottle of oil. She quickly and covertly streaks the oil along the corpse's lips. There are other instances in the script where Annie discovers bottles of oil and herbs in the box of her mother's old possession, so I think this oil serves a similar purpose to the herbs seen in Charlie's bottle, to help make it easier to communicate with the spirits.
That night, while putting her daughter to bed, Annie notices the word SATONY written on Charlie's wall. SATONY is a word associated with invocation or the calling upon a demon or supernatural entity. Specifically, it seems to be used for necromancy rituals. Necromancy is the act of communicating with the dead. Shortly after Annie discovered the card left by her mother, she turns the light off and sees her ghost standing in the dark. The inclusion of SATONY on Charlie's wall may not just be for her to communicate with Ellen, but potentially all of the cult members who are now staying close outside the house. At times, you can hear what sounds like the echoes of ritualistic chanting. At night, we see someone breathing outside of Peter's window, and Charlie comes across a strange woman burning something in the field outside their home. All of these forces are at play to ensure that the entire ritual goes according to plan.
The revival of Paimon at the expense of the Graham family is analogous to the Heracles discussion in Peter's English class. Heracles was a hero in Greek mythology. Peter's classmate explains that Heracles' fatal flaw is arrogance.
Because he literally refuses to look at all the signs that are being literally handed to him the entire play.
Throughout Hereditary, we see clues that the family is being manipulated by this demonic cult, but most of the viewers won't recognize them on first watch or before watching Things You Missed. However, the English teacher reminds the class that the author, Sophocles, wrote the oracle's vision as absolute, meaning Heracles could not have avoided his fate no matter what. So the discussion shifts to a debate about if this is more or less tragic than a story where the characters have agency.
I think it's more tragic because if it's all just inevitable, then that means that the characters had no hope. They never had hope because they're all just like hopeless pawns in this horrible, hopeless machine.
The Graham family was destined to go through these tragedies because their world is being manipulated by Paimon. The girl in Peter's class calls the Oracle characters pawns, and we could also apply the chess metaphor to Hereditary, where the characters are pawns to the desires of King Paimon and Queen Leigh.
That afternoon, Charlie collects the bird that crashed into the window during her class and cuts off the head for later use in one of her crafts. This is the first example of decapitation, which is the one aspect of King Paimon in the movie that doesn't seem to be derived from the Lesser Key of Solomon or any of the other grimoires or ancient texts that mention him. It also foreshadows the ending, where Charlie's own head would be placed upon a mannequin to serve as a demonic idol. The Invocations book found in Ellen's box does contain a drawing of Paimon riding on the dromedary with 3 heads as cargo. This must be connected to the 3 generations of women who are decapitated over the course of the story. Birds also seem to be a special symbol for King Paimon, almost as if he associates himself with a great bird. Charlie draws a picture of a bird wearing a king's crown in her sketchbook. She has artwork of a bird beside her bed. Her desk is filled with sticks and nests, and the tree house where she likes to spend most of her time resembles a birdhouse. The cult moves swiftly after the burial to recover Ellen's body, because it would later play an important role in the Invocation initiation ceremony. For the time being, they stash it inside the Graham's attic.
A week after her mother's death, Annie attends a support group. If this is exactly 1 week later, the date is Tuesday, April 10th, which means that we're coming up on Friday the 13th. That seems fitting, considering that Friday the 13th and occultism are both only observed by the superstitious.
Careful, Zach, you don't want to piss off the non-skeptics like last time.
When Charlie is working on her craft, she sees this light flare travel across the room and direct her attention to the window. Everyone is going to have their own interpretations about what this is. Personally, I see it as the life energy of an entity with no human vessel. And I believe we see multiple entities travel in this form. In this case, it's Ellen, who is trying to point something out to King Paimon, who is still inside of Charlie. We see the light flare close in on the window, and Charlie gets up to look out that window before going outside towards the treehouse. That night, Charlie goes with Peter to a school party. On the way there, they drive past a telephone pole with the Paimon insignia carved into it, suggesting it was always the cult's plan for Charlie to be killed at this spot. At the party, Peter goes into a private room with friends, where 2 kids are watching a decapitation scene from an old movie. Like Heracles, Peter was being given many signs about the impending tragedy, but was still powerless to prevent it. Charlie eats a cake with nuts.
Seemingly way too many nuts.
I think any cake with nuts has too many nuts, but in this case, the cake triggers her allergy. So Peter tries to rush her to the hospital, but a deer in the road causes him to swerve out of the way while she's sticking her head out the window for air. The telephone pole cleanly knocks the head off of her shoulders, and with that, the first part of the cult's plan was all but complete. Paimon was now released from the confines of Charlie's female body, and this loss would send the family spiraling. To use Peter's school lessons as an example again, it was a great crash which led to a great depression in the family. Someone from the cult would go to retrieve the head at some point for later use. The family's reaction to Charlie's death is very different than the reaction to Ellen. Everyone in the family is completely destroyed, which seems to be a part of the plan. As we mentioned above, it seems like you have to be mentally deteriorated or broken before the demon can possess your soul. We've seen similar ideas expressed over in the Conjuring franchise, which also deals with demons from the Lesser Key of Solomon. Usually, Ed and Lorraine Warren come to a family to investigate the paranormal, but we also see them mend issues in the family's day-to-day life, boosting their morale and making them stronger in their fight against the demonic entity. Hereditary lacks any psychic superheroes, and there's not really anyone to help the Grahams make it through their tragedy. After the funeral, Stephen discovers the word ZAZAS written on the wall in their bedroom. This is another invocation term left by the cult. ZAZAS is similar to Zaza or Zozo, which is part of a supposed phenomena among Ouija board users where, upon asking who they're speaking to, the board would spell out Z-A-Z-A or Z-O-Z-O. This is essentially evidence that the cult has been in the house to communicate with the other side. The family was right where the cult wanted them, and their desperate hour would lead to the most disturbing set of circumstances yet.
Annie, desperate for some kind of last connection to her late daughter, sleeps in the treehouse outside and uses space heaters to keep warm, which emit a red glow reminiscent of the fires of hell. Like everything we've seen so far, this has a purpose. It foreshadows the use of the treehouse as a demonic chapel at the end of the story. The next time Annie visits the support group, Joan makes a move to get close to her and gain her trust by introducing herself and making herself relatable by saying her son and grandson drowned a few months ago. Neither me or CZ are particularly convinced that Joan ever even had a son and grandson, but we'll get into that. Joan needs Annie to open her family up to the occult by performing a ritual herself, so she positions herself as a friend in order to eventually encourage her. A day later, one of the cult members slips a flyer about the open séance into the Graham's mail slot, but it gets ignored, so Joan switches to plan B, continue to freak Annie out. As she's working on her miniatures, some supernatural force knocks over one of her paint bottles.
I guess we could call this a tiny little air yeet.
The spill directs her attention to the slip of paper with Joan's number, so Annie finally decides to visit her. Joan makes her tea, and when Annie drinks it, a black herb gets stuck to her lip. The same herb seen before in Charlie's bottle, meant to make the subject more receptive to necromancy. Joan is essentially buttering her up to be possessed by an evil spirit. Look at how her eyes dart to the teacup when Annie puts it down, checking to make sure she consumed what she was supposed to.
During their next encounter, Joan tells Annie that a medium came over and conjured her grandson. She demonstrates the ritual, where Annie sees a glass slide on its own, something blows on Annie's hair, and some supernatural entity writes the words, "I love you, Grandma," on a chalkboard. She tries to make Annie believe that her grandson is doing all this, but I personally think that there is no grandson and Paimon's spirit is responsible. I say this because most 7-year-olds probably wouldn't be this bad at spelling, maybe I'm wrong, but Ari Aster has also stated it's a piece of misdirection. It plays as a seance scene, but it's really a much darker conjuring, and they need Annie to take part in it in order to bring it into the house and in order to further this ritual along. When she invites it in, she escalates things. So that's exactly what happens. Joan explains how Annie might be able to talk to her own daughter.
First, light the candle, Then choose an item that belonged to your daughter. That will be your link. Mine was the chalkboard. That's my link. It's all right. It's all right. It's okay. There you go. Then when you're ready, read this out loud, every syllable.
The inscription is in a different language. Joan acts like she doesn't know what it is, but again, I think she's probably lying, and she mentions that every member of the family needs to be in the house, probably to ensure that she can curse all of them. While driving home, Annie hears the sound that Charlie used to make, telling us that Paimon's spirit is with her. She wakes everyone up to perform the séance. They see Charlie move the glass on the table, open the cabinet door, and toggle the flame on the candle. Of course, this is not really Charlie, this is King Paimon responding to the dark ritual that Annie's performing, and as a result, he possesses the body of Annie, causing her to emit this creepy, demonic-sounding noise. Before taking over her body and seemingly speaking as Charlie.
Hello? Mom? Mom?
I'm not sure if this is Paimon taking a moment to adjust to being in a new body, or if Paimon is acting like Charlie to deliberately freak out Peter, but it doesn't really matter, because Peter absolutely gets freaked out. This does raise the question, if Paimon wants to inhibit a male body, why does he first go for Annie, not Peter? I think it's because Peter essentially wasn't ready yet. Annie had been driven to madness by that month's events. Peter was psychologically damaged, but hadn't quite completely lost his mind yet. Annie was also made more vulnerable by drinking the herb-spiked tea from Joan, and being the one to physically perform the ritual because she believed that she could talk to Charlie again. By possessing Annie's body, it would be a lot easier for Paimon to continue to freak out Peter and drive him to the point where he can also be possessed.
You could argue that Peter was also buttered up to be possessed using the black herbs because he's shown to have a bag of marijuana that he smokes with friends. You could certainly make the case that the cult slipped something in there, but then again, when Peter starts seeing the light in class, we never see his friend react.
It also appears that Paimon doesn't permanently possess Annie. She seems to go back to normal after Stephen pours a glass of water in her face. It seems that Paimon doesn't use her again until later. My thought is maybe he goes dormant inside of her until the time is right. At this point, the words LIFTOACH and PANDEMONIUM appear on the wall in the hallway. LIFTOACH appears to be a rough English spelling of a Hebrew word, lifto, which means open, and PANDEMONIUM, as you probably know, means chaos or mayhem. When we put these together, the phrase describes how the family has now opened themselves up to the chaos and mayhem of hell.
This idea was confirmed when in his Reddit Ask Me Anything, Ari Aster said that LIFTOACH PANDEMONIUM translates as open up to chaos.
I don't know who runs the Hereditary subreddit, but a huge missed opportunity not naming it Hereditary.
It's Redditors, what do you expect? There also may be a dual meaning behind pandemonium. The word was originally coined in 1667 by English poet John Milton in his poem Paradise Lost.
The studio came to me with that.
No, not that John Milton. The story references Lucifer's rebellion in heaven and subsequent banishing. At the suggestion of one of Lucifer's followers, the fallen angels build Pandemonium, a temple and the capital of hell. The word was crafted by joining pan, a Greek word for all, and demonium, which is apparently Latin for evil spirit, creating a place for all demons. The word has evolved over the years, with its meaning ranging from a place of disorder to lawless confusion.
Much like Los Angeles.
It's probably also around this time when Joan sets up a ritual in her kitchen with the intention of targeting Peter. The room is covered in candles and draped in white sheets. Peter's photograph is taped to an idol in front of some kind of dish, as well as in the centre of this triangle as previously mentioned. We also see a crude miniature version of the treehouse chapel scene foreshadowing the rebirth at the end of the movie. The bird that Charlie decapitated at her school is mounted to one of the toys she used to tinker with. This represents the idol affixed to her own head. The animals surrounding it represent her worshippers bowing down to her in the treehouse.
It seems that Annie is not the only one interested in creating miniature dioramas. This creates an interesting parallel. Annie loves to create and manipulate these miniature scenes of moments from her and her family's life. She believes that she has control over these scenes, but in reality, she is the one being controlled and manipulated by Paimon and the cult. We see this in the way that the exterior shots of the house are photographed. Cinematographer Powell Pogorzelski uses a tilt-shift lens for many of the establishing shots. This type of lens is known to make its subjects look like miniatures. It's a subtle suggestion that Annie and her family are actually the ones being manipulated. The Lesser Key of Solomon mentions one of the benefits of summoning Paimon is his knowledge in art. Just as Annie is an artist manipulating miniature scenes, think of Ellen as an artist manipulating her family. The next day, Paimon would continue to torture Peter in new and inventive ways, one of which plays on another ancient superstition. During history class, Peter sees the Paimon light flare, and it directs his attention to the cabinet next to him where his own reflection stares back at him with an evil grin.
One interpretation of this is that the grinning reflection that we see is in fact Paimon. For centuries, mirrors and reflective surfaces have been believed to be incredibly powerful objects. Because of their dual nature of being one part in the real world and one part in the world of celestial reflections, they are sometimes considered to be a boundary between the material and supernatural worlds. Mirrors have been thought to harness a variety of powers, from being used as a tool to scry or see into the future, to trapping the soul of the recently dead, and being a portal similar to those seen in Alice Through the Looking Glass. There are plenty of examples of the power of mirrors across films and literature, whether it's vampires having no reflection or calling on Candyman or Bloody Mary. Peter nearly has a heart attack after hearing the Paimon clicking sound that he associates with his dead sister. This weird experience gives him the idea that he's being haunted.
Peter just called me Annie, terrified, crying in the halls, convinced he's being threatened by some vengeful spirit.
In the night, Annie finds Charlie's sketchbook drawing up pictures of Peter all on its own. Peter is awoken by the click sound, and he sees a horrifying vision of Charlie standing in his room and losing her head. The family dog seems to react to this, causing him to growl and bark, an example of the trope of animals being able to see supernatural happenings that humans cannot, which also came into play when I talked about The Conjuring. Just then, a phantom pair of hands grab Peter by the head and try to yank it off. This was most likely just a tactic to scare him and further turn him against his mother, who had rushed into the room because of the commotion. In an attempt to put an end to all of the paranormal horrors, Annie throws Charlie's sketchbook into the fire because she believes that it is the item that connected her to the world of the dead, and opened the family up to communication with some other spirit. However, her own sleeve simultaneously catches fire, demonstrating that she is now linked to the evil in the house. Desperate for answers, she tries to visit Joan the next day, but she isn't there, probably because she's at Peter's school trying to expel his own soul from his body to clear the way for King Paimon.
I expel you! Satony! Dagony! Paragon! Peter! Get out!
Back in school, he continues to be distracted by the wave of light, which must be Paimon pointing him in the direction of the classroom, where he completely loses it. He hears Charlie's clicking sound from all directions before his body contorts, and he involuntarily slams his face into the desk, breaking his nose.
Meanwhile, Annie sorts through her mother's old possessions, leading her to discover Ellen's involvement in the occult and friendship with Joan. She also comes across her mum's body rotting in the attic, decapitated and dressed in a gown with the Paimon sigil, very likely embroidered by Ellen herself. The symbol is also painted on the roof of the attic, and she finally makes the connection that this icon matches the necklace given to her by her mother. She still believes that burning the sketchbook is the key to stopping the demonic infestation, but when she tosses it in the fire, her husband is the one to go up in flames. I see this as a statement from Paimon. He's sending a message to the family that they have no control over outcomes. They're not going to win, so they may as well give up and allow the possession to take place. And that's exactly what happens. Paimon travels to her in light flare form, and we see her expression change from mortified to blank, much like the blank expression that was always seen plastered on Charlie's face. Using Annie, Paimon would pull out all the stops to get to Peter. He awakens in the middle of the night to see an orange glow coming from the treehouse. Perhaps orange is Paimon's favourite colour based on the fact that he always wore an orange sweater while possessing Charlie. His mother's body swims through the air in the background, defying gravity, an example of the hints from the Invocations book that Paimon's abilities include manipulation of physics. Peter comes down to find the house totally dishevelled and his dad burnt to a crisp in front of the fireplace. Meanwhile, his mum is lurking on the ceiling behind him, and the creepy smiling man from the funeral is naked in the closet doorway with the sinister grin still not erased from his face. He turns back at a noise and his mum is gone, having climbed over to the other corner. She roars and runs towards him, causing him to run away into the open attic and lock himself in. Annie climbs onto the ceiling and repeatedly bashes her head into the door. The whole attic is illuminated in candles, and the spot where Joan's body had been kept now contains the photo of Peter, this time with his eyes burnt out, just like the photos that appeared in Charlie's sketchbook.
Rumor has it that the original ending involved Peter losing his eyes, which probably ties into the old saying, eyes are the windows to the soul. Even though Peter doesn't end up losing them in the movie, I think this imagery still works on a symbolic level. After hearing a fleshy noise, Peter looks up to find his mother floating above him, sawing her own head off with a thread. She stares intently at him. More unclothed cult members suddenly populate the attic, and this seems to be the exact point where Peter loses it and he jumps out the window. As he's lying there, the beam of light floats over and lands on him. It seems to be absorbed into him, which I think is the most convincing evidence that the light flares we've been seeing are spirits without a body to reside in this case, King Paimon. Annie floats into the treehouse, and Peter makes the clicking noise, confirming that at long last, the king has finally managed to possess his male host. He climbs into the treehouse, where there is a ritual in progress. Rows of people are bowing down. He sees the mannequin at the altar. Charlie's head wears a strange crown, and behind that is a sunburst pattern, the same one seen on the cover of the Invocations book. Seeing this now brings to mind the Sun Gate from Ari Aster's second film, Midsummer, which also had a triangle-shaped temple, not unlike the triangle we saw in Ellen's room and throughout the movie. The mannequin is embossed with the Paimon sigil and stands beside a birdcage containing a live bird. We already discussed the significance of birds for King Paimon. Joan places the crown on Peter's head and assures him that everything is alright now that he's taken on his proper male form.
You are Paimon, one of the 8 kings of hell.
In the Lesser Key of Solomon, Paimon is described as one of the 9 kings of hell. I wonder if this change was made to give more meaning to the requirement to face northwest when calling upon Paimon. That way, each king is in charge of one cardinal direction.
We reject the Trinity and pray devoutly to you, great Paimon. Give us your knowledge of all secret things. Bring us honor, wealth, and good familiars. Bind all men to our will, as we have bound ourselves for now and ever to yours.
With all 3 steps complete, the cult has completed the transfer of vessels, and Paimon can lead from his desired male body. As for the Graham family, they really were just pawns in a horrible, hopeless machine. Which brings me to the same question posed by Peter's English teacher. Does the locked fate of the family and inevitable triumph of King Paimon make this story more tragic or less tragic? I want to give a huge shout out to Sarah from What the Horror. Without her research and analysis, this video would not have been possible at all. What the Horror is one of the best up-and-coming horror movie channels. She does reviews, rankings, and my personal favorite, Truly Horror Tuesdays, where she goes over the behind-the-scenes stuff that is sometimes stranger and scarier than the movies themselves. She just released her own video on Hereditary versus Midsummer, a comparison of Ari Aster's first 2 films, which you can check out by clicking on that video on the left. Be sure to drop her a sub, ring the death bell, and select all notifications, and we will see you in the next video, assuming we both survive.